never step outside. It's so well built for conventions. And I think the NFL Combine really is a league event rather than a national event. I think at this point, the NFL Draft has become a national event, and thus I think it appeals to there's reason to put it in different cities. I like that the Combine stays in one place. Now to my question a moment ago, Adam, do you think that Bryce Young should be the first quarterback taken, and do you think it should be the Colts moving up and trading with the Bears? The Bears have kind of made some news. We'll kind of shift into NFL news. The Bears are open to trading that first overall pick. Colts are obviously a team that's vying for it, that's interested in it. Do you think the Colts should move up to make that move to get that first overall pick? And do you think it should be Bryce Young?
Yeah, I think it depends on who's on the top of their board, and who they think Houston will take. If Chicago sits tight and doesn't move, then you have Houston, Arizona, and Indy. So I think Indy could get either Stroud or Bryce Young. If they rate them equally, then no, I wouldn't trade up to get them. The only thing you need to watch out for is maybe a team or two below Indianapolis, like a Las Vegas or a Carolina, or even like Tampa down at 19. Somebody trying to make a move to get up there in the top 4 to get a quarterback. But I think if you rate Young and Stroud the same, and you're happy with either one, I'm not sure I'll give up draft capital to move up those couple of spots to get either one.
Michael, you said that C.J. Stroud is your favorite quarterback in this draft. Do you think he's going to be the first quarterback taken overall?
I personally have him rated higher than Bryce Young, but I don't know if a bunch of these NFL GMs do. Bryce Young, people love the SEC quarterback. He's a winner from Alabama under Nick Saban. He has the skills, the intangibles. He's just precise with a lot of his throwing. So I think that personally, I also don't believe the Bears should trade the first pick because there are a lot of good defenders that are available in the top of the draft that I think they wouldn't be wise if they trade back and lose on those players, whether it's Jalen Carter or Will Anderson Jr. But I don't know if the Colts are going to jump up to first either. But if the Colts do, I could see them picking C.J. Stroud just because he is the more prototypical quarterback. They do like to feature more of the RPOs, and they do like a lot of the collegiate concepts. So it could be something that could be worth watching.
You brought up something that's really interesting to me, which is, first of all, I think that Will Anderson's a stud. If there's a way to trade back, if I'm the Bears, get to 4 with the Colts and still get Will Anderson to fall to me, because I still expect the Texans to draft a quarterback at 2. So that guarantees me either Carter or Anderson, one of those 2 defensive players. That's where I see it working out for the Bears, because I almost think of it like, to take from another sport, the Celtics had the first overall pick. They trade with the Magic. They trade with the Orlando Magic. Magic take Fultz. Lakers take Lonzo Ball. And Jason Tatum falls to the Celtics, the guy they wanted the whole time. I feel like that could be the Bears in this situation, in which they could get Carter or Will Anderson at number 4, because they know what the Texans are going to do. If Bryce Young goes first overall, C.J. Stroud's going to Houston, and vice versa. I feel like that's locked in. I don't think that the Texans are going to trade up to move up to number 1 overall. No matter who else they're bidding against, I think they're going to settle with whoever of those 2 is available. They'll go with, unless Anthony Richardson really does pull a rabbit out of the hat during the combine and somehow stuns the scouts into vaulting him to number 2 overall. But to me, I think the Bears really do need to move out of that first overall pick. I don't think there's value. I think Carter's a great player. He could still be there. If you're drafting within the top 4, I think there's a chance that an outside team could even move up to number 3 to draft a quarterback. I think, to your point, there are a couple teams out there that I think have the capital to go make an impressive move. And again, the name I'm going to keep echoing, Anthony Richardson from Florida. We know what Bryce Young is. We know what C.J. Stroud is. I think those guys are going to go 1, 2. Carter and Will Anderson will go 3, 4. The only way I see that changing is some team like Carolina moves up to number 3 because they want to go get their guy. And by the way, I do think it's Carolina. I think Carolina is targeting him in a major way. I think that's the guy that Frank Reich really wants to deal with. Adam, do you disagree with anything I'm saying?
No, I think Richardson, he has a lot of upside in that Florida offensive line. Passing offensive line was a little rough last year. They had a really good running game, but I think there's a lot of potential there that we haven't seen. The one thing I will say is I kind of disagree a little bit with Michael, but I think the Bears absolutely should trade out of that first pick, and I'll tell you why. They have the most cap space right now available in the NFL next year, and there's a lot of good free agents coming up on the market. Yes, Will Anderson and some of these defensive prospects are really, really good to have, but the Bears have so many needs. They have needs all over that football team, right? They lost the last 10 games of the season for a reason. I would trade down not only once, twice, or maybe even 3 times. And the reason I say that is with the cap space, like I mentioned, you can sign free agencies and just start hurting draft choices and start just getting quantity of players, but also quality, keep tumbling down the first round with such a high pick in the draft. It wasn't that long ago in early 2000s where the Chargers traded back and they got Tomlinson, I think, at the 5th or 6th pick. And then they traded back again and ended up getting Drew Brees in the first pick in the 2nd round. Well, that was your staple for how long in San Diego, right before Brees left to move on. So if I'm the Bears and the cap space that they have and being in this position, I don't think, could Will Anderson be a generational type talent? Possibly. But I don't see anyone that I would hang around that top 5 for that you absolutely must have to have with all the needs that Chicago has. So I would get out of there and get as much capital as you possibly can.
It's interesting. I'm split between the two of you. Unlike Michael, I would trade out of the first overall. Unlike you, Adam, I'd stay around the top 4. I'd want either Carter or Anderson. I think you need to build around a defensive leader. I think you have that on the offensive side. I look towards the team farther north that's doing it correctly. The Detroit Lions. You have your guy on defense in Hutchinson. I think you need to build around someone like that. I understand your point. You need to accumulate picks. Bears have a lot of picks as it is. So a part of me thinks that they need that defensive star, especially a young one that they're going to get on a favorable contract. I know what you're saying about players in free agency, but those guys come with a heavier price tag. Nice to have a quarterback and a star defensive player on their rookie deals for 3 years together. That's going to be pretty, helpful in building the rest of your roster. I do acknowledge, though, that a majority of a Super Bowl team is built between rounds 2 and 4 of the draft. First round picks, they come and go. You find your guys in undrafted situations or late rounds, but it's really rounds 3 and 4 in which you build a majority of your team. So getting as many 3rd and 4th round picks sometimes is advantageous. So I understand why the Bears are thinking that way. Michael, if you were let's say the Carolina Panthers, would you be willing to move up, try to make a move with the Bears, try to make a move with another team? Or if you're the Carolina Panthers, are you comfortable waiting to see how the top of the draft kind of plays out?
So first off, I'm not 100% opposed to the Bears trading back. Obviously, if they get a great deal, they can't pass up on it. The Panthers being at 9, it's really tough to see because if they really do rate Richardson or let's say Will Levis at that position at pick 9, I don't see many teams jumping in front of them to get a quarterback because the reason why I was alluding to with Will Anderson and Jalen Carter is that the Cardinals, they also do need a defender now, especially that J.J. Watt retired. I think that the Cardinals, they can either stay put at pick 3 and go with one of those defensive studs, or they can themselves get traded back and try to get a nice deal. But it really does depend on draft night. No one really knows with all these mocks. It can always just depend on one trade to ruin everyone's draft board. But personally, I like Richardson. Being from South Florida, I watched a lot of him at UF, but there was just a lot of inconsistencies and indecisiveness that it's tough for me to overlook because, yes, I do know he's super athletic. He has what the new age football is looking for, but he's just too erratic for me. His footwork is great and he can scramble for yards, but at the same time, I don't think he has that great of a feel for progressions.
It's too bad he's probably going to get drafted too early and by the wrong team. He'd be the perfect person, like a Mahomes, to sit behind an established quarterback for like his first year, maybe his first year and a half, get a feel for things, continue to mature and develop. And then I think his raw talent is there. Has he developed enough? To your point about progressions, we're going to close out on talking about the draft, at least for the moment, with this last thought. make a quick round of it. Adam, how many quarterbacks do you think are taken in the first round?
Let's see. Young, Stroud, Richardson, and most likely Levis. So I'm going to say four quarterbacks in the first round.
Michael, do you agree?
I do agree with 4. I wouldn't be shocked if I know he's coming off an ACL injury, but Hooker, he was fantastic at Tennessee. I would not be shocked if a team takes a flyer on him and one of the later picks in the draft, but right now I only see 4.
By the way, I totally agree with you, Michael. I really liked Hooker. I was so sad to see that injury because I really liked him and I thought his stock was rising in the way you want to see over someone's final season in college. And finally, give me one overall expectation that you have of this 2023 class, Adam. What's an overall expectation? Is this going to be an all-time great class? Is this going to be a miss of a class? What's an overall expectation that you have?
I don't think you're going to look back on this and think it's one of the best of all time. But the one expectation I do have is there's a lot of top flight wide receivers come out in this draft. There's a good 10 to 12 solid wide receivers. So with the way the league is going and pass heavy, I'd like to see some of these kids come out and see that 3-4 years down the road, we're not talking about 3 or 4 of these kids as huge prospects.
Michael, what's one overall expectation that you have for this class?
I think defense is going to outperform the offense in this year's draft.
Michael took the one I was going to go with. I feel like this is a year in which the offense isn't blowing me away. I'm not as crazy about the running back position as I have been in years past. I'm not as crazy about the wide receiver position as I was in years past. Adam, you might feel more strongly than I do about it. I think this is a year in which there could be some really good defensive talent, but I also think this is a draft class in which there are going to be some really good players that you don't know who are taken in the 4th or 5th round who end up being really good players. I actually think that the first round isn't going to be as exciting as we've seen in maybe the last few years. The quarterbacks will be, but I don't think the overall first round will be. I think rounds 3 through 5 could be fascinating because I think the floor is higher. I think the ceiling is lower. So I think this class is going to have a good mean average, but it's not going to have the spectacular Hall of Fame talent, at least not, throughout the first round. It may be within the top 10, top 15 picks. You might see some Pro Bowl talent, but not in the same way that we've seen in years past. Okay, we're going to shift on from the draft. Make sure you're following Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Butt Fumble Sports on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing. And, of course, on Twitter, @SportsFumble. Here talking with Adam @SpotterAJ on Twitter, as well as Michael Dobbin @MikeDobbs94. Both of them are contributors to Butt Fumble Sports. Make sure you join and sign up for our free newsletter at buttfumblesports.com.